Imagine a royal palace so vast that even sunlight forgets its way into certain rooms, yet one chamber buried in its heart has remained sealed for 2 centuries. No heir dared to touch it, no historian could access it, and no government survey could unlock its past. The city around the palace modernized, but that room stayed frozen in time. Whispers say it holds the final breath of a heartbroken queen. Others speak of a curse so potent that monarchs signed decrees forbidding entry. But legends do not lock doors, people do. And this door was locked by someone terrified of what lay inside. The palace stands in Rajasthan, where sandstone palaces rise from desert dunes like memories refusing to fade. Built in the mid-1700s by Maharaja Ishwar Singh Rathore, it embodied wealth, culture, and empire. Every wall displayed miniature paintings, every courtyard hosted festivals, every archway carried sandalwood fragrance. Yet behind this celebration of life, the Maharaja was nursing a private torment, a princess he brought from another kingdom who became the love of his life, but whom his kingdom never accepted. Her name was Raina. To tell this palace's story, you must first tell hers. Raina did not belong to royal blood, she was the gifted daughter of a poet from Ujjain. Legends claim Ishwar first saw her reciting verses during a temple festival. Her voice was said to break arrogance, and some claimed even the gods paused to listen. The Maharaja offered her a place among his musicians, not a crown, not a marriage, just proximity. Yet proximity rewrites destiny. Within months, he fell in love so deeply he renounced tradition and announced their union. That announcement made Raina an enemy of the palace, especially to Madhavi Bai, the Maharaja's political wife whose marriage secured alliances. Madhavi Bai tolerated concubines, dancers, musicians, women who floated around royalty without threatening it. But Raina was different. She was educated, loved, and willing to participate in state discussions. Rumors spread that the Maharaja listened more to Raina than to his ministers. That was enough to trigger fear. 2 factions emerged, those who saw Ishwar as a progressive ruler embracing intellect, and those who viewed him as a man betraying centuries of lineage. And in the middle stood Raina, silent, unwilling to defend her love publicly, because every word she uttered was turned into a weapon. As resentment grew, the palace turned cold. Raina's movements were limited, for her protection. Letters she wrote to her family mysteriously never arrived. Her poetry gatherings were banned. Ishwar, facing pressure from nobles, created a private apartment in the palace's eastern wing, isolated from scrutiny, where Raina could live in peace. It consisted of 3 rooms, one for rest, one for prayer, and one for writing. That writing room would become the sealed chamber. The last time Raina was seen in public, she wore silver instead of royal gold, a symbolic refusal of royalty. Then came the palace's darkest rumor. One winter night, a maid claimed she heard a violent argument between Raina and Madhavi Bai. Another claimed she saw the Maharaja leave Raina's chambers in tears. But stories in palaces mutate. Within days, gossip spread that Raina intended to leave the palace forever, a humiliation no monarch could afford. Officially, she fell ill. Unofficially, she disappeared. Some believed she escaped at dawn. Others claimed her body was cremated secretly. But many believed something worse, that she never left the palace walls at all. The Maharaja never spoke of Raina again. Not to his advisors. Not to his people. Not even to his descendants. But he issued one order: her writing room, where she spent most of her days, would be permanently sealed. No one was to enter. Not even him. He instructed court masons to close the door with mortar and sacred red thread used for curses, and then he signed a decree forbidding future rulers from reopening it. When asked for explanation, he replied only, "Some love must remain unbreathed, or the world will burn." 2 years later, Ishwar Singh died on his way back from a diplomatic campaign. But his decree outlived him. The treaty between royal families forbade altering his east wing. And so a room became a monument, not to victory, but to emotional cowardice. Generations of kings inherited the palace. They fought wars, built gardens, welcomed British officers, formed new alliances, but avoided that corridor like plague. Even servants refused to sweep near it. They claimed footsteps echoed behind the door at midnight. Some even swore that anklets jingled when monsoon winds hit the palace. When India changed, the palace changed with it. Independence arrived, the monarchy dissolved, and royal estates became tourist attractions. Historians catalogued weapons, paintings, saris, thrones, but when they reached the sealed space, the surviving Maharaja, an Oxford-educated man, refused access. He said, "Some rooms serve memory, not curiosity." His sons rolled their eyes at old superstition, but even they avoided the corridor. None of them feared a curse. They feared shame. Family archives hinted that Raina's story represented betrayal, not passion, and that opening the room would expose private guilt. In the 1990s, as heritage tourism erupted in India, journalists tried investigating. One reporter bribed a guard to chisel a corner of the mortar. According to legend, that guard developed a sudden fever and left without collecting his payment. Others mocked the superstition, calling it coincidence. But Rajasthan survives on story. And in this desert, coincidence is never just coincidence. The sealed door soon became a tourism pitch, not officially, but through whispers. Guides pointed toward the east wing and told travelers, "That room has breathed no air for 200 years." Around this time, the descendants hired a restoration team to strengthen old walls. A young woman named Kavya was on that team, an architect who admired hidden histories more than flashy palaces. She did not believe in curses. She believed in archives. And she was determined to learn why one single chamber could paralyze a dynasty. She traced letters, read memoirs, interviewed elderly palace workers, but records always stopped at Raina. Her identity vanished after one winter. Kavya became obsessed, not romantically, but historically. She knew women erased are women worth recovering. One day, Kavya approached the current palace caretaker, a man in his 70s named Devdan, whose ancestors had served the palace for 5 generations. When she asked about the sealed room, his face tightened. He told her an old family story, that his great-grandfather once accompanied Maharaja Ishvar to the room before sealing. They claimed Raina's final manuscripts were kept inside. Not poetry for the kingdom, poetry describing its cruelty. Words that could delegitimize rulers. Devdan believed the room wasn't sealed to protect love. It was sealed to protect power. Kavya's skepticism turned into outrage. Erasing a poet to preserve ego felt barbaric. She asked the palace trust for permission to open the room, citing cultural preservation. Her request led to a debate. Some argued history required transparency. Others said reopening would stain a respected dynasty and provoke political noise. A sealed chamber is harmless, an exposed scandal is not. Finally, after months, a decision came: the trust would not open the room unless the government ordered excavation. And the government had no time for dead poets. Then something unexpected happened. A famous Bollywood historian posted a short documentary about India's sealed palace room. It went viral, not because of facts, but mystery. Within weeks, thousands demanded answers. For the first time in 200 years, curiosity outweighed shame. The family panicked, not because of spirits, but because the modern world does not tolerate secrets. Kavya sensed opportunity. She partnered with the historian, gathered public signatures, and petitioned the authorities for heritage evaluation. Pressure mounted. Democracies don't favor closed doors. At last, a date was set. Conservation authorities, archaeologists, historians, and the royal trust witnessed the slow removal of mortar. The corridor was dusty, suffocating, but silent. Workers peeled away the layers, revealing a wooden frame still wrapped in ritual red thread. The caretaker offered final warnings. Cameras flashed. Crows circled. When the hinges loosened and the door finally opened, air escaped like a sigh held for centuries. But instead of a supernatural chill, what emerged was stillness, ordinary stillness trapped in extraordinary expectation. Inside, the room looked smaller than myth described. Curtains long decayed clung to rusted rods. A cot rested against the wall. A writing desk sat beneath a latticed window. Paper scraps littered the floor, preserved by isolation. No skeletons. No blood. No supernatural relics. Just a room abandoned mid-thought. The archaeologists entered wearing gloves, picking up each sheet. They found verses, hundreds of them. Some were love poems. Some were protests. Some were confessions of suffocating loneliness inside a palace that adored control more than art. Raina's voice finally breathed again. One poem stunned everyone. It read as a letter addressed not to the Maharaja, but to history itself. She wrote that she never wanted to leave Ujjain. She warned that royalty was polished slavery. She admitted that though she loved Ishvar, she feared the kingdom more than she loved the king. She predicted that her story would be buried because it made men uncomfortable. She wrote, "Let silence be my tomb. If my words survive, kingdoms fall apart." She never imagined silence would last 200 years. Another folded sheet revealed the emotional truth. Raina had asked Ishvar to let her leave. She begged him to annul the marriage, send her home, and restore peace. She feared Madhavi Bai's faction. She feared war between women. Ishvar refused. He believed love required possession. And possession required imprisonment. The truth was not romantic. It was tragic. Raina likely died not from murder, but from despair. Her final writings read like someone starving for agency. She wrote about isolation weakening her, her voice cracking, her breath tightening. The palace had caged her into myth. Once the poems resurfaced, debates exploded across India. Feminists called Raina a historic victim of patriarchal politics. Traditionalists argued that royalty lived by rules outsiders couldn't judge. Historians attempted neutrality, but even they admitted, sealing a room for 2 centuries to hide a woman's truth was an admission of guilt. But sometimes revelation does not heal. It complicates. The royal descendants faced public pressure, mockery, and academic condemnation. Yet Kavya believed truth, even painful truth, was progress. The royal trust now faced a dilemma: should they publish Raina's manuscripts or destroy them? Some argued that releasing them would rupture legacies. Others believed that transparency honors heritage. While debates raged, ghost stories surrounding the room declined. People no longer blamed spirits. They blamed decisions. The curse was never supernatural, it was human refusal to confront shame. The room became a museum piece, and schoolgirls began visiting, not to tremble, but to celebrate the lost voice of a poet who fought constraints. Raina's hometown in Ujjain erected a memorial stone mentioning her as the poet who spoke against thrones. Whether she intended rebellion or just refuge remained debated. But India embraced her. She became a symbol of women whose words outlived their restrictions. The Rajasthani palace saw an influx of visitors demanding to stand before the unsealed threshold. They wanted to breathe the same stale air that once suffocated poetry. Tourists took selfies. Guides told softened versions. But Kavya knew the truth was not spectacle. Truth was inheritance. 2 centuries after her disappearance, Raina became relatable not because she was royal, but because she was ordinary, someone pressured by expectations, trapped between love and autonomy, punished for choosing herself. Millions of women recognized their lives in hers. Millions of men recognized their mistakes in Ishvar's. And suddenly, the palace was no longer architecture, it was commentary. The sealed room became a metaphor for silence forced upon generations. Rajasthan turned myth into conversation. Kavya later wrote a research paper examining not just Raina, but the psychological cost of historical erasure. She argued that the palace protected its reputation by burying a private woman's collapse. She stated that every sealed room in every culture hides a story someone felt too fragile to confront. Her article won awards, but more importantly, it humanized royalty. These were not gods. They were people failing at love, loyalty, and courage. Raina's poetry abandoned grandeur and embraced honesty. In 2025, a playwright adapted her verses into theatre. Audiences wept, not because Raina died, but because she represented countless unnamed heartbreaks throughout history. Suddenly, royalties from performances funded restoration of women-led archives. The palace itself created a gallery dedicated to suppressed female voices. The sealed room, once feared, became a sanctuary for expression. Nothing supernatural emerged. Just accountability. And accountability is scarier than ghosts. And so the story ends not with mystery, but with revelation. The palace room sealed for 200 years did not imprison a curse, it imprisoned a woman who refused to disappear quietly. Today, it stands unsealed, allowing air, judgment, and empathy to circulate. The world learned a painful truth: sometimes history seals its rooms to protect its illusions. But time has a way of cracking doors open. And when those doors open, we do not find spirits, we find ourselves, staring at the cost of silence.